Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. If you're on this side of the equator and or this side of the pond, like in the eastern United States. So happy Tuesday. It's around lunchtime. I am Brian Roma, and this is Mining the Key Store, the YouTube channel that talks all things public key infrastructure, all things PKI. We're glad to have you here. I hope you're having an amazing week so far. It's a little bit chilly here in the southeastern U.S. where I am located, but we're adjusting. We're dealing with it, not nearly as badly as folks that we know in, Anchorage, Alaska, or New England, the New England portion of the United States, or even the Nordic countries over in Europe. We're adjusting and dealing. It's all good. So I would love to hear from you. This is the month of February, and we have some very special content that we're going to be sharing with you in the month of March. And so to kind of lead into that, some of the topics that I wanted to focus on center around showing your... Nice. And see some people joining the stream, and that's awesome. In the month of February, what I wanted to do is focus on some things that we could do to show some love. In the United States, on February 14th, we celebrate Valentine's Day, and warmth and friendship and relationships and all of the warm fuzzy things that go with that. So I wanted to talk about some things that we could do to show some love to our Active Directory certificate services stack. So we're going to talk about certificate authorities and some of the other roles that are in our ADCS build out, and just see, what kinds of things resonate with you, what kinds of things you might be using in your environment. And then in March, we have some things that we're going to talk about in the way of automation and reporting. So a lot of these steps are things that you would build out yourself and schedule on your own. And then we have some special content we're going to be putting together to talk about ways that you can orchestrate these things together so it's not so individual and slicing pieces up a little bit at a time. So those of you who have joined the stream and are commenting in the chat, that's awesome. Thank you for joining. Glad to have you here. What kinds of things are you doing in your given ADCS environment to maintain and monitor your certificate authorities, whether that's the offline route certificate authority or the issuing CAs, or possibly the curl distribution points, the web enrollment, whatever roles that you have? What kinds of things are you doing, and at what intervals? So we have as part of our subscription package that's available through PKI Solutions, we have group coaching calls that we have with our PKI professionals. We do that twice a month, and our topic that we're going to kick around tomorrow talks about this specifically. We're going to dig into strategies around, should you schedule and when? What kinds of things should you be doing on what kinds of servers and at what interval? And whether you have hardware security modules in the mix, that's another question. So glad to have you all here. Go ahead and keep those comments going. What I wanted to do is dig in just a little bit. Now, we talked some strategy last week, and a lot of what happens in public key infrastructure consulting is you get a response back. You say, well, I want to build this the right way. I want to configure this server to meet best practices, or I want to build this to the correct standard. And very often what you'll hear from PKI professionals, if you ask, is this the right way to put something together? The answer is very often in return, and it's very frustrating to hear it. It depends. It depends on your service level agreement with your organization, the type of work that you're doing. So if you're doing credit card processing and you have tens of millions of users doing hundreds of millions of transactions every second, that's your margin of error is much, much less than if you have certificates on a handful of handheld devices that are used for security guards to walk through the building. And now security is important, physical security is important, but you might be impacting 5 or 6 people, and maybe they can do physical checks if they have devices that need certificates. Maybe they can get by with physical checks for an hour. Whereas an hour, if you're doing hundreds of millions of transactions a second and your CA infrastructure goes down, you're hemorrhaging money every single second. So when we start talking about maintenance and backup schedules, how often we schedule tasks, where you put your data, how closely you safeguard it, how often you test it. The answer is very much it depends. I'm going to call out some things in some of the items that we're going to look at today, which is in backing up your certificate authorities. Because these are Hyper-V servers, like the location where the backup is running, it's on the local machine. That's not a good idea. You shouldn't be backing up a critical server to itself, because if the server fails and you don't have an off-site backup solution, if you don't have another file share that it can go to, or you have an enterprise backup that can grab those data repositories and save them someplace else, when you lose your server, you also lose the folder where all the backup jobs have been posting their content. So there's some things like that I'll try to call out. But keep in mind that what you have for your given production environment and the service level agreement and your risk tolerance for where you put your backups, who has access to it, how often you run it, how often your backup jobs, how often you test your backups. A lot of that relies on how critical the role is of these certificate authorities and related servers are to you and your business. The more critical the infrastructure, the more likely that I would say you need to test things out, keep it very secure, audit it, back it up, encrypt it, and all of those things. Okay. Cool. All right, I'm going to minimize my studio as always. I've got a limited number of screens here between my video production setup and my streaming studio so that I can see comments and interactions on YouTube itself. I'm also going to be doing a screen sharing element to this. So if you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'll come back to it a couple of times. I'm not ignoring you. I just can't share and have my production studio on at the same time. It looks like something out of Inception. So I'm going to bring up an editor here. And I'm going to bring the music down. It's usually this point in the session where it's like, I can't hear. Hopefully that's not too loud for all of you. Hang on, I got a PowerShell window here that I'm going to resize. There we go. Okay. So let's talk about some of the different strategies around backups, and then we'll take a look at an example script that we use at PKI Solutions. So there are many people that say, well, my certificate authority is a VMware vCenter workload. It's a Hyper-V machine. It's a Hyper-V guest. Can I just create a snapshot? Couldn't I just do snapshots on a regular basis and be good with that? Like we say in security, the tools that you use and you use consistently are the better tools to choose. So if we come up with something that is so complex and so elaborate that you won't use it, you don't use it on a regular basis, then you might as well fall back to a snapshot or exporting a virtual machine or something like that. Having said that, keep in mind that Active Directory Certificate Services runs on a proprietary JET database that comes with the role that's installed when you enable the role in the operating system. So just like if you run a backup Microsoft Exchange or Microsoft SQL or MySQL or any other database, Oracle, any other database service, the cleaner that you can get the data out of that database environment, the better the chance that you're going to be able to restore and get more complete data to get services back up and running. So if I run a snapshot and I don't have an agent to talk to certificate services, and I don't have a way to quiesce, to pause the database services that are actively running with Exchange or System Center Configuration Manager or vCenter or any of those other database or cert services in this particular case, if I don't have a way to pause database services, then I run the risk of losing data that might be happening. There might be transaction certificates that might be issued There might be a curl publish that's getting ready to be published right in the middle of when you kick off your snapshot. And so you run the risk of having incomplete certificate authority backup data. Now, there's a whole conversation about how often do I back it up and what data is lost. I mean, I got to an environment a few years ago. I was working in a particular environment where they were very concerned about their backups, and they had scheduled tasks set up to, not by role, but by a batch file, copy the curl out and then run backups almost immediately afterwards. And between those two tasks, the jobs were running so aggressively that certificate services was having a hard time running on these machines. And those of you that have used ADCS going back to Server 2008 or even possibly Server 2003, generally speaking, certificate services is not a workload heavy process. Now, the database can get really big and it become unwieldy in order for ADCS services to start, but generally speaking, you don't peg a server, you don't max out your processor and RAM capabilities. In this particular case, they had scheduled tasks that were running that were so frequent, they were so aggressive that cert service, you could barely get into the server remotely, let alone have cert services running, which is just crazy. So could you run a snapshot? Could you look at something like a Veeam or a server snapshot? You could. But many of those technologies don't have a way to tell certificate services to stop, to pause, and therefore stop reading from or writing to the JIT database that makes up Active Directory certificate services. Now, are you getting something and doing a scheduled snapshot? Yes. Is it better than nothing? Yes. But this is a more complete way of running a backup for your given environment. And when you're talking about snapshots, if you've worked in virtualization environments, there are certain strategies around, you don't really want to run snapshots forever and keep them forever. So how many snapshots do you keep? And when do you choose to merge those snapshots or delete them altogether? And what happens, sometimes you run into issues with snapshots where you can't upgrade a virtual machine version or a host or a virtualization platform version until snapshots are out of the mix. Yeah, it can get messy pretty quickly. Okay, double checking my Q&A section here just to see if there's any questions or comments around the snapshot conversation. So let me scroll up to the top here and let me share. Okay. Let me pull this down just a hair. Okay. So what we have, something that we now keep in mind, in this particular case, we're going to be backing up to a departition. This is something that we're going to release to the same server where we're running our backup job. Not the greatest. At a minimum, try to get it to a separate volume. It'd be great to go to a separate location, a separate file server, an encrypted location, a target where a backup job can run immediately afterwards, and the database files can be gotten rid of. But in this particular case, we're going to run it on the same machine. Now, something to keep in mind, if you are running hardware security modules, you should be backing up the pertinent HSM files associated with the given manufacturer that you're using. So I've worked with Lunas in the past. The Luna client folders, most specifically the crystokey.ini file, which has a lot of the config values. It lets you know the partitions that are assigned to a given machine. It might have credentials rolled into it for you to be able to authenticate to the HSM in order for the client on your certificate authority to be able to connect with that HSM. Those kinds of values are in there, so it would be really good to grab that as well. When you talk about backing up a certificate authority, you need to think about everything that's associated with the CA. So if you've got an HSM in the mix, in my opinion, you should be backing up configuration and client files at least at the same interval that you're backing up Active Directory certificate services. And I've got a frog in my throat, so just one second. All right, let's see if that's a little bit better. Okay. So we've got some formatting things that are in here, and I'm not going to go through this line by line. I mean, looking here, there's 160 or so lines of code with some, 130 lines. here, but some things worth noting. And if you go to, in fact, let me do this. Let me cut back to me. Let me find Vatums has a you're watching me surf the internet. Projects. I'm checking to see what he's got on his GitHub. Okay, PSPKI. Repositories. I was just checking to see if Vatums had an example of this that you could grab that isn't quite so specialized. This is built for Talus, and I don't see something out there. A bit of housekeeping. So I have been trying to get syntax posted into the description of the existing episodes that we've got. So some of the commands where I'm like, I'm going to put it in the show notes. And I've been having problems. I had an automated process to take what I'm using in my examples in the lab and post it to the description, and it's been failing. I've been trying to troubleshoot it right along. And what I'm finding is that there are certain characters that YouTube does not allow in its description. It apparently interferes with YouTube as a website on its own, which creates some challenges. So I'm probably going to be putting together my own list of commands or repository of code that you can go back to see what it is that I'm running. So I'll see what I can do to get this put together, but let me cut back. So Vatums doesn't have anything, and I don't have a repository for you to be able to look at this. And there are several characters in this that are not permitted. I can't put it in the description. But, you know, some of the things that are important is that you need to make sure to grab the event log, the entirety of the event log, and back that up. If there's anything that's really important in certificate services, it's making sure that you get what is happening and when on a given CA from a key management and auditing perspective. If there's a security event or if there's a services failure, or if you're just troubleshooting, knowing exactly what time something happened, where a particular file was moved, or if you lost connectivity to your hardware security module, or somebody ran a command and tried to export the private keys for your given server. You know, the more specifically that you can get your event logs, the better it's going to be. So here's an example, and I might be, well, I'll get the repository going. But here's and this is in PowerShell. You might find some commands or scripts out there that are batch files. But here's an example of a PowerShell command that is it's backing up that CA role service. And in this particular case, it's saying, give me just the database. When you're done with the process, give me the database and put it in the backup folder location. This PowerShell command, PowerShell's written by Microsoft for Microsoft products. It will pause certificate services as part of that backup process, and then put it in the database location that you have called. And at the top of the document, we talked about this already, there's a CA backups folder that's created. You can name it anything that you like. So here's an example of, as opposed to a snapshot, which is independent of certificate services and may not pause CA services and or quiesce the database in order for you to be able to back it up. This particular command, if you don't have anything else running, or if you haven't scheduled anything else, just doing this would get you, better than nothing. And you could set up, I mean, there's much more to, you can back up your templates. You should be backing up your HSM configuration and definition files like what we talked about. But, just doing this would give you a better safety net, that, in my opinion, than running snapshots and or relying on your VMware or your Hyper-V team to come to your rescue, because they don't necessarily understand certificate services. Let me come back to me and check, see what's going on with our live stream, if there's anything. Looks like everybody's good to go. I'm going to cut back. Okay, so come on, scroll with me. You know, we've got some debugging that's written into here that's important. We're also grabbing the CA policy.inf file. Now, this is something that it creates the rules of the road for certificate services. It sits inside of the Windows directory, and it does things like it determines how many layers deep a given certificate authority infrastructure is. So if you set that there's a path constraint that you can say in there. There are values that you can put in there for the crypto level for a given certificate authority. You can also put items associated with your policies, your certificate policies for what you do for your organization. And those values can be or would be stamped into templates and therefore certificates as they're being released. So CA policy.inf, super important. You should have one and have one configured. There are some tutorials out there on how to do that. This is something I want to dig into much more granularly. I'm trying to start in very broad strokes. So like for somebody that they've never built a CA before, and it's like, I've never built one. How do I do it? I've never tested one. How do I get a lab? I've never backed one up. How do I do that? I'm starting very general with the content we're putting here on the channel, and I'm hoping to keep getting more and more specific as we dig into the channel and dig in further. And then there's some configuration values that are in the registry. One of the easiest ways to modify certificate services is to go right into regedit and go to this HKey local machine, system current control set services, cert services, configuration, the value that's in here, you know, things like this, where the CDP is located, your AIA, you know, number of CDPs, et cetera, et cetera. All of those are located here. So what you're doing is you're taking that value and you're exporting it to the CA registry. You're calling it CA registry.reg. You can name it anything you like. If you wanted to get super fancy, you could create a script that calls, you know, gets the local machine name or certificate services instance name and creates a CA registry.reg. Or excuse me, and so if this is my offline root certificate authority. So, you know, you could set a variable that says get me the host name and then name this, you know, orca01.reg. That way, if you're taking this and putting it out to one folder location for all of your CA infrastructure, you're not overwriting your registry files, right? So you could get your orca01 and your issuing certificate authority 01 and 02 and so on. And some values in here for backing up the HSM. Again, going through your registry and grabbing certificate services values. To find out if it's an issuing certificate authority. And then giving you some values back. So, so what I've done, based on what we have in our environment, is I've got my, oh, I'm going to sneeze now. It's an eventful day. Had a frog in my throat, had a sneeze. So I created a folder on the C drive and called it scripts. You can, you know, I've seen PowerShell repo. You can name it anything that you like. I have an elevated administrator command prompt that is located in that particular directory. I have certificate services installed on this. This is a standalone, therefore it's not connected to Active Directories. It's a member of a work group. It is a standalone, therefore not an enterprise root certificate authority. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick off this CA backup script. Does not exist. Source name CA backup. What did I do wrong? Let's open it up and take a look. Scripts CA backup. Running it again to get the error to figure out where source name CA backup. Do I have a folder issue? CA backups, plural. Let's see if we can find it. You know what? I need to register the events that are in here. I will bet you money. Let's do this. So we're going to run CA backup.ps1 dash register 1. Now let's try again. There we go. Yeah. Okay. So we need to needed to create an event log source. So we had to register this with the event log in order for it to process. And so that particular command was CA backup.ps1. And we'll work on getting a version of this out there, but slash register, or excuse me, not slash, dash register. And then 1. So that's why it was failing, because it didn't have a logging source. And when it got to the debugging portion, it did not like that. Let me go back over here. Come on. You know you want to. There we go. See, event log, CA backup. So registering that CA backup as an event log source, then the debugging portions of the script can run the way they're supposed to. So I've worked in multiple environments where the certificate authority backups ran at some interval. You need to talk with your backup team and see what their rotation is for their particular, like if you're running, and you know, we've all had issues and challenges with backup platforms, but like if you're using like Veritas Net Backup, you know, are they running a scheduled job every 7 days, and then how many backups is their rotation pattern? You know, are they doing a 3 pass, a 5 pass, and then they're overwriting on the 5th? So if they did like a 5 pass on the 6th job, are they overwriting job 1? That's important to know. And then you want to try to get as many good backups in that pattern as you possibly can. So, you know, maybe, you know, I've worked in environments where they did like a 6-week rotation. I've seen them where they're more aggressive than that. But like a 6-week rotation, and we would run our certificate authority backups on every single, we would have a script like this that would run on every single certificate authority, and we'd run it every 7 days. And we would back up the HSM clients, and configuration settings like the crystokey.ini or security world folders if you're a Talus person. I'm also going to grab my CA policy.inf definition files. I'm also going to export the database, and I'm probably going to be running a job regularly for templates and making sure to get those as well. and getting those to a folder location, preferably that's not the same spot where your CA is. So if your server dies altogether, you've got a fighting chance to build something and say, okay, maybe we call this Certificate Authority 03, and we're going to build up certificate services, and we're going to go through a migration process, but at least we've got a clean database as of 2 weeks ago. That's a much easier sell. How many certificates got issued and or revoked in the last 14 days? That's a much smaller crater than we lost everything. I'm sorry, we have to start completely over. So, let me cut back to me. How's everybody doing? How are you guys liking this so far? We still got some people that are keeping an eye out on the stream. So we've been going for about 30 minutes. I wasn't sure how far I was going to dig into this. I'm going to continue working on getting a repository put together where I can share some of this information with all of you. I'm looking at the stream here, just double checking. So I'd love to be able to share a simplified version of this particular script with you. I just need to be able to do it where I can use like full file paths, ampersands, and slashes appear to be problematic, and I have a couple of options. I either sanitize the syntax and replace, like take all the punctuation out, or I need to get something like a GitHub repo going and share with you links to the GitHub repo. So it's probably what I'm going to do. I'm keeping all of these. I'm saving all of these files. And so I'm going to jump off of the stream and see if I can get this saved into a document that I can link in that you can actively get to. So, all right, everybody. More information to come. Perhaps next week we will talk about event log backups. That's another piece of this that can, in this particular backup job, you can run this on your routes, on your issuing CAs. You can run it on your policy CAs. This is certificate authority role agnostic. You need all of these pieces, regardless of where in the certificate authority chain it might be. And so event log backups is another piece that needs to happen. And that's also agnostic of whether or not it's an offline route CA, issuing CA, and so on. So perhaps we will dig into that a little bit more, along with there's some conversations around Talus HSMs and how to back those up as well. So love to hear from you in the comments below. How often are you backing up your certificate authorities? What kinds of things are you doing? Is it a snapshot? Do you have your own flavor of batch file that you've discovered or put together on the internet? I'd love to hear from you soon. So I hope you have an amazing week. Show your servers some love. It's the month of February. Give them a little bit of love. We beat up our CAs a whole lot. What are you doing to take care of and make sure that your CAs continue to run in top fighting condition or top loving condition if it's the month of February? All right, everybody. It's good to talk with all of you. I hope you have an amazing week. Okay.